The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
TV party tonight! What? TV party tonight!
Oh, we got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews.
Don't want to talk about anything else.
We don't want to know.
We're dedicated here
To our favorite shows.
Oh, my ticket!
Everybody loves Hypno Toad.
Gary Dog!
Pearson and Blursball.
Futurama!
Good evening. You are listening to a Radulich and Broadcasting Premier Podcast TV party tonight. I'm your host, the man-did reporter, and frankly, I'm nasally, Mr. Mark Radulich. And tonight, our favorite show is The Crown. The Crown is a historical drama television series about the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, created and principally written by Peter Morgan and produced by Left Bank Pictures and Sony Pictures Television for Netflix. Morgan developed the series from his film The Queen, 2006, and his stage play The Audience, 2013, which also focus on Elizabeth. It is brought to you by the good people at Left Bank Pictures and Sony Pictures Television. We are talking season 6, the sixth and final season of The Crown, which follows the life and reign of Queen Elizabeth II. The first 4 episodes were released on November 6, 2023, and the second, consisting of 6 episodes, were released on December 14th. It began production shortly before the death of Queen Elizabeth II on September 8th, 2022. And joining me is the Hot Foundation of the Radulich and Broadcasting Network, the Hitman and the Anvil. First, from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, he's the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. It's Andrew Graham. How do you do, sir?
I'm feeling excellence in my execution tonight, Mark.
Outstanding. And here he is, folks. Dave the Anvil Wright. How do you do, sir?
I got that reference.
Thank you, Captain America. Well, gentlemen, and we are missing one lady who joined us on this journey, and that's what I was going to say to start us off with. This has been a long journey through 6 seasons of The Crown. I don't remember when we started doing this, but it was before we went to video. Andrew's wife has been on here. I used to watch this with Melissa back when there was a Melissa. I mean, this has been a long go of it, but here we are at the final season of this. I don't know if it's an experiment, but definitely in this journey that they went on with Netflix, where they wanted to encompass most of the life of Queen Elizabeth II and all the things that went on during her reign. And they had to change actors and actresses over different time periods. They interjected a lot of different events. We talked 2 and 3 times over the course of these reviews about what the monarchy means to England, what its purpose is, how one conducts themselves, what it does to people. And then it started to focus a lot on Diana and Charles, and we talked a lot about that. And here we are at the end. And before we get into what happened in season 6, Andrew and then David, going into season 6, what did you want them to deal with? Like, as fans of the show, as people who have reviewed these with me, as people who have a vested interest in this topic, what did you want to see them tackle towards the end, and did it meet your expectation?
Maybe I'll start off with this one. I think what I was hoping for was, especially as you mentioned, with a lot of Diana time in season 5, hopefully kind of finish that story out relatively early. Then, get into, the 21st century, obviously get into what's going on with William and Harry. Obviously early on, she loses both Margaret and her mother in fairly short order. And I wasn't sure when or how they were going to actually end the series, whether they're going to end it, with the Queen's actual passing, or if they were maybe going to pick, I thought maybe they would pick Phillips passing or something along that line. So I wasn't quite sure where it was going to end. I know I definitely didn't want as much Diana as I got in this season.
Okay.
And maybe I'll jump in with this one right now. So one thing that I kind of have a theory on before we get into this is that there has been a little bit of change to the structure of the series as it went through production. So I want to say towards the end of season 4, correction, was initially announced, they always announced it as being 6 seasons long. Then towards the end of season 3 or 4, they said, no, we're actually only going to do 5 seasons. And then I think between seasons 4 and 5, they said, no, we're going back to 6 again. Or maybe it was partway through 5, they announced they were going to 6 again, which I kind of get the sense led to them having a bunch of scripts to suddenly fill in very short order, and may have something to do with the structure of the first half of this season, which I'm going to be completely honest, nearly sank the bloody thing for me.
Yeah. So just a little behind the scenes, and then I'll throw it to you, David. We have a private chat. I've mentioned it before on Damn You Hollywood that we have a chat of all of us, people that populate the Radulich and Broadcasting Network podcast. It's a group of us friends. And then we have some private chats, in between us. And Andrew's like, Andrew will send me podcast recommendations, will check in on me, like we'll chat or whatever. And there was a period there where like every day I was getting a new message from Andrew. This fucking season, yo. This is done. Like I can't do this anymore. Oh my god, I almost like to the point where you almost didn't want to do the review. And I'm like, how bad? And like meanwhile, I'm like, I'm not even close to watching this. I'm not going to get to it until we actually get to the review. So I'm just like, Jesus Christ, how bad is this? Having seen it now, I have questions.
It's Mark's Rebel Moon.
Oh my god.
Stay tuned for that next week, everyone.
As
we'll
soon
talk
as
Monday.
Diana shows up, it goes bad.
But yeah, I have questions, but I kind of see now what you were getting at as to why it was so frustrating for you. So David, your expectations and whether or not the show met it.
Yeah, much like Andrew, my expectations or my hopes was something other than Diana.
Okay.
And yeah, like for meeting those expectations for at least the first half, not very good. It was like I think I kind of heard that they were kind of going to do the crash in the first episode, and the first episode would have been dealing with Diana's death, but nope, we got like the whole first half of the season, some sort of soap opera sprung into existence, and it was the second half that started with the dealing with the death of Diana, and then mercifully switched to something else. Mercifully is putting it a bit too strongly. It was just of course, Diana is an important part of the story. She is the mother of the future king, and there was the whole drama between her and Charles, Camilla, and she was, as they said, a very beloved, public figure. I never really followed the details of the royal family growing up, so I kind of just heard things here and there. Like obviously, when Diana did die, that was really big news. But I wasn't really into the whole Charles Diana drama. I knew that there was some issues with drama and infidelity in the royal family, but that was about it. I'm not a royal follower or royal watcher, I guess they call them. But I'm pretty sure if you were to break into what the producer writer's house, there's a room in there that is full of Diana memorabilia, newspaper clippings, probably even a few of her clothes on mannequins that they had bought off of eBay, like
jar of toenails.
Maybe not quite that creepy, but it's like there's someone has a lot of Charles and Diana plates that they've smashed Charles off of, I'm sure.
Possibly a whole board of like red strings connecting various people to other people, and a
maybe like if you've seen the movie Flushed Away, which you should because it's an excellent movie. Like think of the Toads, Charles and Diana collection of memorabilia.
And I hate to say it this way, especially after hearing you guys talk about, please, for the love of God, no more Diana. If we could just bend over and let
call it a hijacking of the show
and insert the gravy pipe and put a little bit more Diana into this, so that we can just get this out of the way.
I'm just glad that wasn't a print Andrew and a puppet analogy after the day that apparently has been going on Twitter.
Yeah. So my thoughts on the first 4 episodes, which deals with Diana's demise, unfortunate demise. let me describe this for the audience who may be tuning into the review but hasn't seen the show or whatever. The first couple of episodes deal with her going on an invited holiday and getting kind of Freaky Friday, parent trapped with Dodie. And so it's a lot of them getting to know each other, her screwing up his love life, him kind of just trying to follow his dad's instructions and wooing Diana.
The real villain in this story.
Yeah.
Just these few episodes, not overall.
Yeah. And then there are pictures that are taken of Diana on said holiday that end up becoming worth a lot of money, which then motivates a lot of other paparazzi photographers to continue to photograph her. And that's what leads to this sort of flashpoint where, because I remember when Diana died, and I remember hearing like they were like racing from photographers and they got into a car accident and she died. Mm-hmm. And I had always thought it was that way. I had always thought, just again, I don't remember what year this is, but I just remember thinking that's just the way celebrities are with paparazzi. Paparazzi is always going to be there. They're always going to be running from paparazzi. I remember there was a rapper back when I was a kid, and part of his like 1-900 number, there was like a commercial that he did, and it was like him running and a bunch of girls chasing him. I just thought it was always Beatlemania all the time.
The first 5 minutes of Austin Powers.
Yes. So the fact that it never occurred to me that what was happening to Diana, as presented in the show at least, was a relatively new phenomena of being that hounded by paparazzi, to the point where someone felt the need to speed into a twisting tunnel and hit the wall, killing both passengers. At least that's how it's presented in the show, which got a pretty visceral reaction out of me, because that's the narrative that the show is telling. It's she innocently takes this trip. It's a setup so that she can get with Dodie's son. And there's a cut to the royal family, and they're like, this is a problem. And poor besieged queen is like, why? What is the problem? She divorced herself from this family. Why are we still dealing with this? It's like, the problem is, and this is kind of what I want to talk about, because her death is her death. It is what it is. But this is the only thing that I thought was interesting about this 4 episodes, was the political element. Mm-hmm. It was the aide to the queen saying he wants British citizenship. If his son marries Diana, he's in a position of leverage to get it. And we don't want this. And here's my thing with that. That's interesting. I wish there had been more of it. I wish there had been more of a discussion of why he was pushing Diana and Dodie together. What was he trying to get out of it? Why they don't want him to have citizenship, Andrew. That was the most interesting thing about those 4 episodes to me, and it was a very small thing.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, the whole thing is totally bizarre. Like it's almost like a backdoor pilot for an entire spin-off series that they also finale'd at the same time.
Yeah.
Because if they had come out at the end of this and announced, hey, we're going to do a 4-part Diana spin-off series based in the universe of The Crown that deals with the Dodie relationship, then okay, whatever, go with God, have fun with that.
Yeah, but the Mandalorian did not show up.
Sorry?
The Mandalorian did not show up.
But, exactly, Grogu and the Mandalorian did not show up. But anyway, the problem is that, and I think what was on screen was well done, but I think the problem was that there was no point to it. It didn't actually contribute to, like what you said, what the thesis of the series is. Which is talking about the crown, what it does to people, how that environment interacts with everybody.
Right.
So that's definitely one weird part, I think. And on some level, the Muhammad Al Fayed stuff's very strange. And they even bring it back to, like, the second to last episode and kind of derails things a little bit. Like, it just...
Yeah, they don't follow up on it. Like, him saying that Dodie and Diana were killed by MI6 because she was carrying his child. Awesome. Explain why that's relevant. More of that,
exactly.
please.
It's like they almost had to do the checkbox exercise. And I mean, I think it comes at the cost of other characters, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But the other weird, the bizarre thing to me about this is episode 4, Aftermath, which is basically a lesser remake of a movie the guy already did in The Queen. Like, it's so weird to have somebody go to this material, have it be really damn good, then come back 20 years, 15, 20 years later, redo it, and it doesn't work nearly as well.
Yeah, it's like I think you've seen, Andrew, like the series From the Earth to the Moon.
Yes.
Yeah, where it was like Tom Hanks got together at HBO and said, hey, that Apollo 13 movie was pretty awesome. Let's do the entire Apollo program as a TV show, like with each episode being one mission. So obviously they did, Apollos 11, 12, and then Apollo 13. But for Apollo 13, they focused on the astronauts' families and their interaction with the media circus outside, as opposed to doing the actual Apollo 13 mission, because they already did that in a movie.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think that was a good way of doing it. And I don't have a great memory of From the Earth to the Moon other than liking a whole lot of it. But it's like, that's a perfect example right there, is that you start to cover material you haven't already covered. And just the whole Diana sidetrack just made no sense. And then, can I cover one more thing on this and then I'll be quiet for a few minutes? We got to talk about Diana Force Ghost. It's exactly what it was. She came back. She talked to a couple people.
I have a fucking rant about that. So whenever you're ready.
She went in there and emotionally resolved both the stuff with Charles and the Queen in a completely unearned and unresolved way, which I don't think does either the character of the series any credit or the historical figures any credit. It was just
so bad.
Stupid.
Look, every time Robert says, "Why do you watch The Crown? It's British propaganda." I love Robert. I don't know why he just can't let people like things, and why he feels like you shouldn't like that.
Yeah, I'm not trying to call this British propaganda, but anyway, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, my point is, like, I've enjoyed The Crown up to this point. I haven't had many moments. That's why I brought up the Robert thing. I haven't had many moments where I'm just like, I wish I didn't have to watch this. I wish these two Canadian fuckers would leave me alone and not make me watch these things. That hasn't happened. I've enjoyed the shit out of this show. That was so bad.
Oh, God.
That was, my God, the bit at the end where Diana's ghost is talking to Charles and talking to the Queen and all of that was so bad. And it's like, in production, I'm sure they thought it was great. But here's the thing, and this is why it's bad. These people are struggling with guilt. They are struggling with the frustrations of the situation. You as a real person don't get the luxury of having someone's ghost show up to you and tell you it's okay, I forgive you.
Yeah, exactly. It's dramatically disingenuous. It's historically disingenuous.
Right.
At this point in the series, I thought, oh my God, are we heading for a How I Met Your Mother finale?
Yeah, it takes the thing about resolving one's guilt is that you have to put the work in, the internal work in. When you insert a force ghost, as we're calling it, that takes you off the hook, you've now denuded the entire scene of any kind of dramatic tension. And it seemed like it was, David, it seemed like it was doing it for just another opportunity to put Elizabeth Debicki back on screen again. Because the show didn't just have enough Diana. And it was like, no, this is shitty writing. For a show that's this good, for a show that is usually written very, very well. Like, as we've discussed the previous 5 seasons of The Craft, like when your wife was on, Andrew, we never really said the show was badly written. We've talked about it misrepresents certain people, or it gives a narrative spin on something that the people who live through it would tell you it wasn't quite like that. But no one has said up to this point, this is a shoddy written show.
Yeah.
Those scenes are not written well. That choice, that dramatic, cinematic choice was a poor, lazy one, David.
Okay, I'm going to take that as my cue.
Yes, David.
Yes. Okay, just before I really get started here, I should throw in my usual disclaimer that anything I think we talk about on this is about the characters in this show that are based on real people. So when I say something like Muhammad Al-Fayed is the villain of this arc, I'm not insinuating anything about the real person, Muhammad Al-Fayed. I'm talking about the character based upon him. So unless explicitly stated otherwise, I'm talking about these characters, not real people.
Yes.
That
David,
being
you're off the
said,
hook.
yeah, I'm just making sure. Yeah, so yeah. All that being said, that like it didn't affect me as bad with the Force Ghost thing. For one, I didn't think she was the literal ghost of Diana. I thought this was just like a dramatic tool to like sort of externalize the internal monologue of the characters. Like Charles working through his grief and how his regrets about his relationship with Diana, having someone to bounce off of and making it be sort of his mental image of Diana. What I would like to say to her at this point, and she's not here, but I'm imagining in my mind what she would say back to me.
Boy, is there a way to have done that better.
Yeah. Like the basic idea could work.
Yeah,
exactly. It's in a way, it's like if you've Ratatouille, where you have is it Remy the rat? He's like talking to the Gustav, like the ghost of the chef that he adores. Like that's not a real person. It's a real ghost. It's just like a mental image he has of this character that he's working through his interior monologue with. So yeah, like as a dramatic trick, it can work. But yeah, in this case, it didn't so much. But I think by that point, I was so used to Saint Diana that, like the episode where they go to Paris, her and Dodie, and he's like trying to covertly get everything ready to propose to her, despite his dad making things as awkward as possible. Like, oh geez, that part where he like takes them to his house and basically starts naming their children on the phone. It's just like, oh dad, like, what are you doing? This is not how you. This is not going to make this work.
Yeah,
but I digress. But yeah, like the bit where he like finally springs the proposal on her, and she's just like, "Oh, please no!" Like I can at least get the, like I'm having such a horrible day right now. This is just one more thing to deal with. Just please stop. Let's just not. But then you sort of have them sitting down and her giving him this saintly, loving, empathetic, understanding. Like this is like the best way of letting someone down who's ruined their previous engagement and had this whole plan flop. Like for someone who's been dragged around Paris with paparazzi on her, all she wants to do is talk to her kids, and that keeps on getting screwed up. Like she let's be honest here, like no one would really be that understanding in this situation. Like there would be a bit of like, oh, for F's sakes, like damn it, like she would have gone off on him. Like so I'm kind of at that point going like, okay, like this is just this is not this person is not a real person. This is the author's image in their head of what she would be like. Like they put her up on this pedestal, and I just think that I get like my wife turned to me and we were both saying the same thing. Like, how the heck would they have known what was said during this moment?
Yeah, exactly. They're making stuff completely out of whole cloth.
Yeah. As a drama, it's okay, but at this point, it's just like this is fan fiction.
I say, I feel like if you're gonna spend that much time, what the good, the bad, and the ugly of the first 4 episodes for me, and then we'll go one more round robin, and then we'll just move on.
Sure.
The good, the bad, and the ugly. I think it's interesting about the evolution and development of paparazzi that's part of the narrative of those first 4 episodes. Nothing was this bad until candid photographs of Princess Diana became big money, and then suddenly everybody got lizard brain, and lizard brain led to her death.
Well, I keep thinking about that scene in the first season where Elizabeth and Philip are having a fight at their villa, and there's like a film crew outside, to do a piece on them, and they accidentally record the fight, and there's just that awkward moment where it's like, oh shoot, you saw that, and then the cameraman just like opens up the camera, rips the film out, and hands it to them, like no dialogue at all. It was just
right.
We're sorry, we this is a private thing. It's none of our business, and you contrast that now.
Would have been nice if the show reflected on that, though.
Yeah, and that. Sorry, go ahead, Dave, and I'll...
No, go ahead.
I was about to say, so I think that's actually a really interesting point that I think Alicia and I started talking about towards the end of the series, and I think she brought it up, was this whole, not even really, people talk about the paparazzi, but what the problem was the magazines and the press and the newspapers and things like that. And there's definitely this evolution towards these much more predatory tabloids. And there were guys like Piers Morgan involved and things like that that were really pushing and laying out big money for these photos. That's what was really driving the paparazzi. And that was, I mean, even shit, just, I think when we were watching this like mid-December, it wasn't a huge amount, but Harry got awarded £250,000 in relation to basically like the phone hacking that was going on from like the Daily Mail and or whatever the allegedly, I'm just going to put as many things on that so we don't get sued by anybody, but it's like that was being done by the British press in the mid 2000s. So there was a little bit of a, you know, hell bent for leather. We're going to get whatever dirt we can to sell more papers attitude that was driving a lot of this ecosystem that led to the paparazzi.
If you're going to take a moment to explain what the political ramifications are of this affair, they needed to have spent more time on it. They just drop it. This is not good writing. There's a lot that is good about The Crown, but this frustrated the fuck out of me. That they bring up what his ulterior motives are, and then Diana hits the wall, and it's summarily dropped. And then it's picked up a little bit later when he's like, I have proof that Diana was pregnant with Dodi's child and they were killed by MI6. And it's like, oh, you're a lunatic. Can we have more of that? And it's like, nope, we have no time for this. We have to get back to Harry and William.
I think if only they had done like an episode from Mohammed's perspective where from like what puts him to this, like, of course, you know, his son died at a horrible, well, any time for your son to die is a horrible time, but he was like, on cloud nine, like, like, yes, I've done it. My son is going to marry Princess Diana. I have achieved my goals. My legacy is going to be hitched to the royal family. I went from nothing to being, standing right next to the Queen of frickin' England. I'm so proud of my son, and they're dead. Just the wham coming down from that would have been horrible. And as you see, like you start to you want to make sense of all the chaos.
Yeah, I feel like the show didn't care, but then why'd you show it at all?
Yeah, exactly. It came in and it came out, and it wasn't well reasoned. It wasn't well structured, and I find that kind of interesting, given the fact that I think in season 5 they spent like a good quarter of an episode basically giving Muhammad Al-Fayed's backstory.
Yeah.
And not even a complete backstory, because he had a really interesting background. Like his mother was Saudi and she was of some standing. So it's kind of they spent too much time on it. It didn't go anywhere. It didn't honor the thesis of the show and what the show's always been about. Right. Which is that relationship between the crown and society and what that does to people.
Yeah, I do more of Muhammad Al-Fayed's relationship with the crown, what it did to him.
Or don't talk about him at all.
Don't talk about it at all. Or like, maybe him going through like my aspirations cost me the life of my son. That kind of thought process or something. I mean, who would have known this would happen? But it's still like, as I mentioned with Charles, like, and William, like, that thought had to be running through a lot of the people's heads is, like if I just done this, then she wouldn't have been, here at this time, and she could have still been alive. And, the same thing would happen for Muhammad and Dodi. But they didn't.
There was one line. This is the last thing I'm going to say about the Diana thing, and partially because of some personal stuff as of late. But the one thing that jumped out at me, and I laughed at it hard, was, there's an interaction between Charles and Diana, and Charles is like something along the lines of, and this is God, I've had to hear this myself lately to one degree or another. We weren't brilliant at being married, but we are brilliant at this. We are. Essentially, he's saying we're good co-parents. Yeah, let's continue to be good co-parents. Let's continue to work together for the benefit of our children, if nothing else. And Diana's like, right, you're right. And then like the next scene, one of the aides tells Charles, yeah, she's shitting on you in the papers again. And it's like, wait, what? It's like, she basically said you didn't want the kids and something about like his holiday in Scotland. And he's like, No.
Oh no, yeah, it was
Yeah.
her story about her with Dodie got more press coverage than like Camilla's birthday party.
But there was something very specific where she made it sound like he didn't want to have his children in the papers.
Yeah, I don't quite remember that, but I'll take your word for it.
No,
But
it was
yeah,
there.
I-
Very much keyed into it.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
he
yeah,
was
yeah.
pissed about it. He was like, "There's no way she would say that about me." Like we're just because it followed the scene where they were getting along, and he's like, "We finally." It was like that Faramir, like finally we have an understanding of each other.
Yeah,
And in the very next scene, he's like, "Yeah, no, she took
Yeah.
a shot at you in the papers yet again."
yeah. I think the thought that came to mind is like this show treats Diana the way they write Charles treating Camilla.
Yeah, and I mean, again, we go back to the whole idea of it's like that would have been interesting to explore on a level of, okay, so that happened. He said something to her, and then something else came out in the papers. Where did that come from?
Right.
Mhm.
Like, because they kind of did a little bit of that. They kind of did a little bit of that when they were talking about, the Diana interview and how that was obtained in a somewhat not up and up level, and some of the maneuvering that was going on behind the scenes there with the press, and it would have been interesting to kind of continue that conversation as kind of a co-theme and
Mhm.
not so much Diana herself, but
Mhm.
how is the evolution between the monarchy and the press and the monarchy and greater society.
Something else I wanted to bring up real quick related to Diana, but it's a good transition into dealing with, the star of our show, the Queen. The Queen is approached about, I guess, Diana wanting some formal standing with the crown, some position of leadership that she wanted. And I'm sorry if I'm fuzzy on the details, but there's something of the Queen is approached regarding something about Diana, and her reaction is no. She divorced the prince. She's out of this family. No thanks. And they're like, yeah, but she's kind of a celebrity and she's sympathetic, and it would make us look better if we did this. And the Queen's like, no. and I laugh because, like, after 6 seasons of this, I really look at everything that we've said about the Queen. I look at her as one of the few people besides Philip that respects what this is, respects what
Yeah.
the monarchy is, and in all things is deferential to it.
Yeah, I
There's
think we'll get
not
more
a
into that
lot-
in our favorite episode in the second half.
Yeah, there's not a lot of like, what do I want?
Mhm.
It's very much, well, what is the monarchy? And what makes her kind of the hero of this show and a sympathetic figure, and something that once we finished with the Diana stuff mercifully made me enjoy the second half of the show that much more, is how much her, and to a slightly lesser degree Philip, are all about preserving the monarchy as it is and not letting Charles or anyone else, or Tony Blair or anyone else, turn it into something it was never meant to be, to the point where it stops being the monarchy.
Mhm.
And I really like that regardless of how I feel about it, regardless of how anyone should feel about constitutional monarchies, these are people very much beholden to this culture and willing to protect it to the point where they'll sacrifice their own wants and needs. And I don't know, there's something about that I like. But to that end, I don't know if you guys wanted to respond to that at all, but if not, I'll go into my my favorite episode of this entire season. So,
Yeah, Mark, I think I'll just generally say that I think I agree with you on that one, is that, the whole urge to preserve the monarchy and the urge to sustain the monarchy as being the Queen and Philip's driving power at that point is, I think probably one of the strengths of the season. I think one thing I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of would also have been, because I always go back and I always compare every other season to the first, just because that was so distinct from everything else. I would have liked to have seen more time with the staff, like her senior advisors. What are they doing? What are they thinking? What are they saying?
mm-hmm.
Because, show that difference from the first season where you had the Tommy Lascelles, the old standby, old guard guy advising her. and now you have new staff and a very well-established queen at this point.
Yeah.
It would have
David,
been
was
an
there anything
interesting
you wanted to
relationship
add to what I was talking about? Or-
Yeah. Well, yeah, like, I think the idea that sort of shows with the queen is, or the monarch, I guess you could say, is that they sort of represent sort of an ideal, like a cultural ideal for the nation. Like,
Yeah.
you know, there's a reason why we used to call it like the textbook way that you speak British English is the Queen's English. Like how she speaks was the standard that all speech in English was set by. And so, yeah, her service is trying to set as good an example for the nation as she believes so without ruffling any feathers. And like, I mean, this sounds really silly because it is, but so are humans. You know, I wouldn't say like I've really staked a position on, you know, like whether or not to have a monarchy, but I would say that, you know, a lot of the anti-monarchists will sort of say like, you know, it's so irrational, like we should, you know, we don't need it, we can just, you know, be logical. And it's like, have you watched humanity over the course of your lifetime? Like, we are dumb and irrational creatures. We're also capable of great rationality too, but I sort of think that, you know, I almost wonder if sort of the monarch works in a way
draw a
to
parallel.
counteract that.
Let me draw a recent parallel.
Okay, yeah.
I have almost 10 and as of tomorrow, a 13-year-old child.
We're all rooting for you. Best of luck.
Thanks.
Yeah.
They know Santa Claus isn't real.
Yeah.
They got gifts from Santa Claus this past year.
Yeah. Oh, we still have presents from Santa Claus under the tree.
And a couple years ago, when my son was like, "Fuck this! I don't believe in Santa Claus. What are we doing here, people?" You know, my very Vulcan son. And we had to sit him down and go, "This isn't a matter of fairy tale. This is a matter of faith. We believe in Santa Claus because this is a part of the tradition, and so we still do all of the Christmas Santa Claus things as a part of our cultural tradition." And we believe in Santa Claus because that is a part of the tradition too.
Yeah, the story serves a purpose.
Yeah. So we're going to go along and we're going to do all of these things because this is how this family operates. We believe, et cetera, et cetera. And he's like, oh, okay, I get it now. So nobody questions it. So it's a few years later since we had that conversation, he doesn't question it anymore. There's something to be said for cultural tradition and you know, mythology and pomp and circumstance and all of that.
Yeah, I'll get a bit into that with the next episode. I just have one more point.
Yeah, it's a really good transition point, actually, as a rock to cling to when the rest of the world is falling apart. At least you still have this.
Yeah. The one thing I would like to just touch on before we jump into that next episode is what I am kind of glad by is the way that they also depict Elizabeth as being devoutly religious. Because, you know, things are very secular now, and, you know, secularism has its advantages. But I think there's a tendency to sort of wallpaper over the religious aspects of things. And like from her perspective, like Charles and Diana got married. They took oaths in front of God to, you know, honor and cherish in sickness and health while forsaking all others, which Charles pretty much blitzed right past. And then Diana, you know, following suit afterwards, as near as I can tell. So, or the monarch also the head of England. So she's also thinking, does this mean? I'm hoping you all can hear me now. The feed
You're good. Keep going.
Okay.
You're okay.
Yeah. Thanks. So, so she's probably also approaching it from that angle too. Is like, no, like you swore an oath of marriage, you will not, you know, even if you're divorced, you will not remarry for the rest of your lives because you only get one. And you know, and I mean, you know, in the end, she changes her opinion on that, and we'll get to there. But like, I think that's also part of the reasoning of what's going on is, you know, I have to be a moral example for England as well, which is why I'm not abiding by any of this. And just finding my thought here. Darn slippery. So being that moral example and Okay, it's gone. So
I'll
let's-
save you if you want, but I
Yeah.
don't want to cut you off.
Yeah. Sorry, darn, that was a good point too. Maybe it'll come back to me.
Just cut me off in the middle. All right. So my favorite episode of this entire season, Andrew. And I'm going to set this up by discussing her, the way the narrative presents her with Tony Blair. I think you and I, David, kind of talked about it, I think, with the last season, because I remember I cut it for TikTok. So it's like you talking about Tony Blair, like, hey, I've sat next to Churchill. You better fucking bring it, pal. And
Yes.
all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that was from
immortalized on
the
TikTok.
Queen, not from this. But yeah, I love that scene so much.
But Tony Blair and her have this as the narrative. Just like we were talking about characters, I'm talking about the way the narrative is in the show. The way the narrative paints her thing with Tony Blair is Tony Blair has no time for her. Tony Blair is the cock of the walk. He is the Labor Party extraordinaire. And he is like, I will tolerate your existence because I am the Prime Minister of England and I have to. But this is all bullshit. And then by the end of it, because of Bush and the Iraq War, he has his ass handed to him. And he's like, oh, I'm not as bulletproof as I thought I was. And
I thought him at the WI was the even better version of that, in all honesty.
And
I just say
this isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. And maybe I should have given you a little more respect. And she's like, maybe you should have. Go ahead, Andrew.
Can I just say the one thing that I was really hoping for this season that we didn't get was some version of Bush.
I kept waiting for it because I was there, like, watching the news with the big Fox News alert when Tony met Georgie.
Yeah,
when they got off the plane
good as
together.
LBJ. I wanted to see a Bush version.
Yeah, it would have been nice. But so, like, her meetings with Tony Blair and with each successive episode and each successive meeting, him getting further and further off his high horse was fun for me to watch and one of the high points of the show. But my favorite episode is him coming to her. And look, I sympathize with his point of view. I sympathize with the British Parliament thinking, maybe let's cut some of these royal positions. This is not necessary. Especially when you think of, like, these, the High Lord Fancy of, British silverware. It's like, what the fuck is this person? And
maybe I'll jump in for a quick second. But
go ahead.
I watched, a couple of really good documentaries about stuff. Like, there was one a couple years ago that they put out about the Coldstream Guard, which is one of the guard regiments. They wear the big bearskin hats and stuff like that. And they were going around and talking to some of the guys who have, like, the drum major's uniform. And the drum major's uniform is like 12,000 pounds. That's like $24,000 Canadian. So, like, some of these things are immensely, immensely expensive.
Right.
But you can also see, and they kind of establish it, is that there's also that real dedication to the tradition, to everything else. And I think,
well, like,
the Queen even says it, we're the ones who bring the magic.
Well, here's the thing. Never mind all that. She has a really good point. He wants to cut the guy that deals with the swans. It's like, what does this person do? Why do we need a swan person? And she looks at him, and in the most direct, most realist part of any season of the show, then who would tend to the swans? What do we do? Yeah. If you cut this person who deals with the swans, who then deals with them?
Okay.
And they basically have to create a government office for conservation of swans.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump in with here something, just Mark, to give you some context as well and to give the audience context for anyone who doesn't live in a Commonwealth country. So we have things in Canada that are royal. So, for example, just north of us in a place called Drumheller, basically it's where they shot a whole bunch of the town scenes for the Ghostbusters movie a couple years ago. There's probably one of the best dinosaur museums in the world called the Royal Tyrrell Museum. Now, before that, it was just the Tyrrell Museum, but it was given a royal warrant at some point because it was found to have that much value in terms of the work that they do, the conservation that they do, the science that they do, everything like that. So on some level, and again, we go to that question of rationality versus irrationality and putting importance on things. Something like that, getting a royal warrant and getting that designation does have importance to say that this is culturally significant in some way. Now, we can get into whether or not that's always valuable or not for every given institution and what institutions it hasn't been awarded to. But again, that kind of gives you that little bit of the idea of, it's like, if something like this has been designated royal, it's important.
Please don't acknowledge it, but I want to leave that comment there for a little while. Anyway,
This is America. Do.
America, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, we're all part of a false flag.
And we're the ones who did it.
Yeah, we're all part of a false flag organization by the CIA to to siphon money off the American taxpayer for imaginary international incidences.
Beautiful. What I liked about the episode was Tony Blair has
the sad thing is someone's going to take me seriously, and you know it.
I hope that there's this like stack of jobs that he wants to eliminate because he thinks these are all just the dumbest shit. And she's like, I'll take it under advisement. And there was a way to handle that. And there's what she does. And what she does is brilliant. She's like, I don't even know what any of these positions are. Let's talk to these people.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Because here's the thing. She could have just like, I'm the queen and the monarchy is important and everything in the monarchy should stay. And I'm not budging on this, and has no idea what any of this stuff is.
Yeah.
But just sort of does it because she's a loyal monarchist. Or she goes the Charles route of, you're right, let's just pave over the whole thing and make a parking lot about it, And she does neither. She's like, well, let me talk to him and see if these are worth eliminating. And she goes back to Tony Blair after she's like interviewed all these people, and you get to see like there's like a montage of her talking to different ones.
Yeah.
Other than the Swan guy, my favorite other one that they show is the guy that folds the napkins.
Yes. Oh, that's you.
And he's like, yeah. And it's like that example when she goes back to Tony Blair, she's like, what I found is traditions and skills that if we eliminate these people, we eliminate the ability to do that skill. That skill is now lost. And I think about this when I talk to Jesse about like artificial intelligence and technology and, the vast, the rapid coming of 100% unemployment, that there are just skills and techniques and like social mores that get lost over time because we don't do them anymore. Yep. And here's this woman in this situation recognizing the need to maintain those often disregarded elements of our culture. And it's not something I thought about before because I'm always thinking in terms of like, well, if we don't go to the movies, we won't have theaters anymore, that kind of a thing. But she's in the right. Like, she's not wrong about there are elements of our culture that may be, not particularly useful anymore, but still worth holding on to because without them, what are we? And I don't know if the writers intended it to be that way, but that's what I got out of it, Andrew.
That's interesting. I mean, I think, even when we talk about that and you talk about going to the movies, think about some of the arts that we're losing in movies. When was the last time you saw something animatronic? Yeah. When's the last time you saw a matte painting? Like, all of those have transitioned to other elements, but it's like, still, when you see something like that, it's pretty special when it's done well.
Did you hear my review of Wonka?
I haven't gotten to it yet. No, I want to wait until I see the movie.
One of the things I noticed was it was very obviously shot on a set, and I was so happy that it was.
Well, even I noticed in the trailer, there's a scene where they're like flying or pretending to fly, and you can tell it's definitely a wire work piece. And you haven't seen that in so long because now they just create a CGI body double and they have them fly around that way. And it's like, there was something in the physicality of that scene where it's like, that's really cool to see that again.
Yeah, absolutely.
But something I'll say on this episode that I think is interesting, and I think I probably didn't realize it the first time, but maybe it goes to talking about, and I'll go as far to say it from what I understand, both this character of the Queen and the actual Elizabeth II, was that as much as monarchy and separation and everything, that person still had a very human element to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they talked to people with genuine engagement, which I think is a rare skill. Like, they get to go in, talk to somebody, really understand what they were doing and things along that line. And I think
wasn't that one of the things that they said about this particular queen was she had a very intrinsic way of making you feel seen. Yes,
that's definitely it. And apparently a killer sense of humor that you don't always get in this show, but just that really, I hesitate to say common touch, but just that ability to relate to people on a very base level a lot of the time. And it does and I don't even think this show necessarily always does that justice, because they always talk about her as the separation from everything else, which I get, but there's also that element of her knowing everybody and getting along with everybody, because also when you put this in context, a lot of these positions are lifetime. So she would have been with these people for years.
Right.
Well, I think even when Blair says like, "Oh, the royal director of Swan," she's like, "Oh, cousin Toby, yes."
It does go to two different perspectives, because it's very much like you used the word superfluous before, and it's like, from Tony Blair's perspective, like I don't think Tony Blair was in the wrong, because if I'm doing a line item budget audit, I'm like, get rid of the study about homosexual Indians. Get rid of, I'm thinking about Obama's stimulus plan.
Yeah, I mean, remember, we're talking about the Labor Party here, so they would probably be setting up that department, but I digress.
My point is, like, years and years ago, I did a whole thing on the Obama stimulus package, and it was full of so much pork, just so much pork. And I was like, on the one hand, I could justify it, because who doesn't want to study stuff? Like these.
We're gonna have so much fun on the West Wing, by the way.
These building projects and studies and everything that was in this stimulus package, like I understand like why we would spend money this way. On the other hand, like the conservative, budget hawk in me is like, no, this is all fucking nonsense. Get rid of it. So I understood where Tony was coming from. But I'm also very supportive of where she was coming from, of like, no. I know these people. These people are a part of the way this all works. And the way this all works is part and parcel. It's essential to the running of this country. And Tony has to kind of be dragged there kicking and screaming. And I'll tell you, I don't think if he suffers from, his country turning on him with his involvement in the Iraq war, I don't know if he necessarily gets there. I think it was a very... And I was curious about this. I wanted to ask you guys, in your readings, in your living, in your, understanding, was she ever like acutely afraid that Tony would be anointed king or some shit? Because I know there's like the nightmare that she has, but it's insinuated that she's worried.
Close to that.
No, I mean, fun scene, but no, like I don't think we ever heard any news of.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the one thing they don't talk about here is that I believe it's sometime around this period, like, for example, the royals start paying income tax.
Okay.
And I don't think they really address that. But I mean, it's kind of an interesting piece of, it is, and this is probably one of the better episodes of the season, because it does focus back on the institution and back on, again, that relationship between the crown, society, everything else.
Yeah, there might have been a bit more like talk of abolishment of the monarchy during that time, but it was never really like, Tony should supplant the queen or anything like that. At least not in Canada, but we're not always, we're not that close to the home country.
And we have an impossibly difficult constitution to amend at this point.
All right, I have one other thing on my agenda that I wanted to discuss, but before I do, Andrew, what was some of the things that you wanted to discuss about the show tonight, if we haven't already addressed it?
Maybe I'll hit really quick. My personal favorite episode of the season, I think, was probably the Ritz. I think the Margaret finale episode was pretty fantastic, going through some of her history with the Queen. I think, when I
was that the one with their teenage girls?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I fast forwarded through a lot of that.
Oh, you missed some good stuff in there. That was because I think on some level, when I think about the three main characters, kind of the Kirk, Spock, and McCoy of this episode, it's the Queen, it's Philip, it's Margaret. And really, I thought that was a great kind of very sympathetic story of where Margaret was, kind of the end of her life, looking back on good times, looking back on her whole relationship with the Queen, and where that kind of came to an end. And the flashback, I thought, at the very, very end, where she turns around and she says, "I'll always be with you." Like, that was, if you were looking for one of the emotional moments of the season, that was it.
Yeah, it didn't hit me. I'm glad it hit you. I'm not saying it shouldn't have. I just, it was like, oh, that Mark, that was your moment. Nope, passed me right by.
Yeah, and I'm going to say this. I'm going to do one other really quick thing. And I think I said this several times when I was watching it with Alicia. They did Harry dirty. He was entirely... Okay, so for one thing, I got to say, the kid they cast as William was pretty dead on in terms of appearance. That guy looked nothing like Harry. And they kind of made Harry one note of being the bad kid, which I think is kind of the point he's been trying to make for years, where it's like they always cast me as the bad kid, except for the 2 or 3 things where he said, "No, I'm not the bad kid. You've got to believe me." They kind of wrote him very, very shallow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was a bit surprised, especially considering the potential conflict of interest, with Harry having a contract with Netflix. But the one thing I will say, sort of push back a bit on it, I did find, like, in I think the 5th episode where they're dealing with Diana's death and the grief, I thought Harry actually did a pretty good job of sort of watching out for William. Like, he was, again, kind of being a bit of a fool, but you could kind of see it's like, he's doing it to kind of lighten the mood, or get William out of his shell. Like, it's, this is it's a caring brother who's a bit more mischievous and a bit more outspoken, but he is doing for his brother what he needs done to help him through this. And like, that was sort of the good stuff with Harry. And then pretty much after that, he was just the screw up kid that nobody cares about. And back to what you were saying, Andrew.
Yeah, they definitely play that. I will say the way they dealt with the whole episode regarding Harry and the Nazi uniform was pretty damn good.
Yeah. Because now we're into like where the eras where, like, we were both alive and witnessing these events.
Oh, I actually remember the Nazi.
And like the moment he was reaching over there, it's like, oh, here we go. Yeah, I remember this.
I remember the Nazi costume.
I actually have a very specific memory about that. I was in university at the time, and I was doing either a history of totalitarianism or a history of Germany, and this episode had fallen just at the same time that we were just finishing up the end of the Nazis, and our professor decided to have a post-Nazi conversation. So I walk into class, and there's a picture of Harry up on the screen, and Springtime for Hitler is playing in the background, and everybody is howling. And it turned into a conversation about, how can we make fun of the Nazis these days and things like that. But it's like, Jesus, I hope to God that whole story about Philip calling up the costume shop and berating them for being historically inaccurate is true.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Jonathan Pryce, God bless him, plays that entire role so well this season.
Tell you what, he would have been my hero if it was. Yep. In defense of Harry, and I don't know, maybe I'm an asshole. I don't care. I think Harry wearing the Nazi costume to me is funny. And I feel like, God help him, if he's not a famous figure, if he's not the subject of tabloid photography, nobody gives a shit. If I throw a costume party for the Radulich and Broadcasting Network and David shows up in a Nazi uniform, we laugh. We kid him about it. Nobody gets fucking offended. Nobody's like running to Twitter. They're like, look at what happened here. Sorry, let me do it on camera. Look at what David did. David in his Nazi uniform. Nobody cares. But this poor bastard does it. He didn't attend a march. He didn't attend a rally. He didn't, he isn't at the pulpit at his college banging, Mein Kampf on the fucking lectern.
Mind you, 15 years ago, that wasn't happening either.
It's like, it was a costume and he's a kid, and I don't know. I'm also the guy that owns a Kamala the Ugandan Headhunter t-shirt. So,
and I mean, maybe I'll just go to say that I think part of my concern about this whole thing is that this also has to do with the whole, let's do 4 episodes of Diana and cut out the rest of the family.
Yeah.
Where it's like, there was opportunity. God knows there's material out there. We have his biography upstairs, and there's opportunity, there's breathing room if you don't do those 4 episodes to write some of these characters with a little more subtlety.
Well, they also gave short shrift to Kate Middleton.
Yeah.
And look, I know nothing of this woman.
Yeah.
I know she married the future king of England. Who gives a fuck?
Yep.
But the show took time to make it sound like her mom really wanted her and William to get together. And I have no clue. And much like the Fayad thing, I have no idea why.
It was actually more her dad. Apparently, from what Alicia tells me.
I'm sorry, I coughed over you. What'd you say?
Apparently, it was more her dad, but her family was kind of enamored with that whole idea. The other thing that I don't think they really talk about, and I don't know what the exact timeline of their relationship is, but they were on off for a long time. And a lot of that was because Kate did not want to be part of this madhouse. Which again, that seems like perfect grist for the middle of this show.
Right. That's my point. Like, to go back to the beginning, you guys are like, they spent so much time on Diana's death. Diana's death should have been 1 episode, not 4.
Yep.
And so then they don't leave enough time in the series, if you're only going to do 10 episodes, to deal with everything else that needed time and explanation.
Yep.
There's not enough of why Kate Middleton's family wants her to be the queen. There's not enough of who the fuck Kate Middleton is. I don't get a sense of who
Because
she is
everybody
in the
makes
show.
that joke.
Huh?
Because everyone makes that joke. I mean, hell, we've made that joke. I mean, George is like a year older than Annabelle.
So there's just a lot, in where I think the show, it kind of felt like Game of Thrones, to where they were just rushing towards the end.
Yeah.
And not giving time to things that they should have.
Like we really wanted to do Diana. Okay, we did Diana. Now what?
I'm almost kind of wondering, it's like, hey guys, we rented this yacht for 5 days of shooting. Fuck, we don't need to have 5 days worth of scripts for shooting. I guess we're talking all about Diana.
That might be closer to the truth than you think.
Can we get multiple shots of her dropping marbles on them? Why? Because we have 5 days with this yacht. That's why.
They canceled an episode of Below Decks. They gave us this yacht for another 3 days.
The last thing I wanted to bring up, and then David, if you've got anything else, I'll throw it to you. The thing that I thought was interesting about the way that the series ends is there's a line in the show about whether or not the queen should step down. She makes mention of the fact that Charles is like chomping at the bit to be king, and maybe she should let him. And she's internally struggling with it. She's like, I've been queen forever. Charles seems like he's ready. I'll get to why. I'll get to what Prince Philip says about that. But she's internally debating whether or not she should step down as queen and let him ascend. And at the end of the day, she decides to stay on, which I think was the right decision. And I'm wondering how close to reality that was, whether or not, I mean, for dramatic purposes, I thought, she loses a sister, she loses her mom, Diana's dead, all of this stuff has happened to this family. At some point, we all retire from our professions, don't we? We rest, we go and we do something else, we take those last chapters of life and make them about leisure and relaxing and finding other things to do with ourselves. And so that's what she's looking at. She's like, I've done my bit for God and country now. Isn't it time for me to stop? And ultimately she decides not to, which I thought was interesting. My question is, did she really? Or did they just write it that way? But Philip's line that they gave him, whether or not it's true, he was like, no one in this family is ready for this position. And I think in part he's alluding to the fact that if you give it to Charles, the monarchy will crumble within days because he wants to change everything about the way that it works and he wants to modernize it, and he's too close to public perception. It's like the people right now, even in our little group of friends, that are way too interested in what Twitter thinks or X. It's like, that's not how you should run this. You need to be above that sort of thing. And her speech at his wedding, where she's like cracking wise, and it's just like,
if that was an example of the Queen's sense of humor, we would have gotten along very well.
Yeah, that was great. And then, like I said, her conversation there with Philip at the end about no one's ready for this. Thank God you're staying. Like, it's dead on. Like, again, William's not ready. He's still a kid, and Charles is going to fuck it all up if he tries. Not because he's dumb, but because he doesn't. Charles isn't really a monarchist. Charles wants to be what Charles wants to be is prime minister, but that's not his lot in life. So, David first, and then Andrew. Those are my kind of closing thoughts about the show. If you want to address that or anything else, be my guest.
Yeah, a few things. So I finally remember what I blanked out on way back about 3 podcasts ago now. Yeah, it was more that if you look at Elizabeth and Philip's marriage, which had its own fair share of problems, but it all goes down to that scene at was it the end of first or second season where it's been strongly implied that Philip's being cheating on on her, and she just basically sits him down and says like, "Okay, what do you want? What's your price to make this work?"
Right.
And it's just that sort of attitude of like, okay, yes, marriages are hard. This is true. But instead of like just throwing your hands up in the air and it's like, no, I'm going to go to this person or that person. It's like, no, you stick and you make it work. Like
Right.
we swore an oath to God to make this work, and that's what we're going to do anyway. So, and you see that sort of a difference in view between her and perhaps the new generation.
Right.
That's all I had to say on that. As to the restructuring episode, which was probably my favorite episode overall of this season. I like how they sort of go into the evolution of these posts, like especially when they talk about the Swan. They single the director of Swans out, and they sort of say the position was originally to like hunt and kill swans for the king to eat. But as times changed, it sort of evolved into a conservationist position. And as I alluded to before, like if they abolish the position, then the government would just be creating some other like Office of Environmental Protection to basically, do that job that royal is doing. So it's sort of Elizabeth's discovery that no, like we do things that are important. It's not just like a fancy hat and a title and like a budget. It's it actually does do things that make the country work. And it's kind of interesting because like there's a couple of sayings I've heard in sort of defense of more conservative ideas, is that like one is traditions are solutions to problems that we've forgotten about. Yeah, and the other one is traditions are the results of social experiments that were successful. And of course, the big challenge is to know which traditions to keep to maintain what they do, and which to change and to deal with the new realities of the current moment. And that is basically the story of our civilization, is
right,
that process, which continues even now. So I thought that was like a really nice sort of microcosm of society and the monarchy, and the sort of importance of tradition, but also the evolution of traditions. And sort of how it sort of caps off with at the beginning with Elizabeth giving a speech to the Women's Institute, which I'm not sure if there's an equivalent in America or Canada for that matter, but it's a fairly big organization in the UK from what I understand, where it's like all the women get together and sort of organize. There's actually a movie called Calendar Girls that sort of deals a bit more with the Women's Institute and doing a nude calendar to raise money for cancer research. It's a good movie. You should check it out if you're into English stuff.
Okay.
But I digress. And then you get to the end of the episode when Tony Blair addresses the Women's Institute, and he just bombs. Like this isn't like negotiating a ceasefire between rival countries, and the threat of genocide or anything like that. This is just him talking to like the housewives of England.
and he fucked it up.
And he just messes it up. And then like there was just that little like, nothing was said directly, but that you could tell she was a bit happy that he I can do something you can't. So that was good there. One character I would like to give a special shout out is Philip this season. I thought he didn't have a lot to do, but where he did, he was excellent.
Agreed.
I like him sort of straightening William out as he's going through his mopey, like my mom's dead and Dad, this is all your fault kind of thing. And Philip just kind of goes in there and firmly but kindly sort of walking him through it. It's like, what you think your dad hasn't thought about how he treated your mother and how that could have that set in motion her death, right. like how this weighs on him, and like that moment at the end where they are able to reconcile and you sort of Philip's off to the side, like it was really well done. And they sort of allude to like Philip looking back on his being a father to Charles, and maybe him sort of thinking like, man, I wish I'd known this before, back then. Maybe things could have gone better between us.
Grandparents and grandchild relationships are way different, though.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
there's something.
Absolutely.
Look, there's something to be said, and Andrew, I think David, you'll come to know this.
Yeah.
It's something about being in it.
Yeah.
You know, when you're in parenting, when you're faced with it, it's different than when you're able to kind of take a generational back seat and kind of watch from a bird's eye view.
Yeah. But yeah, as someone who's we're due to have a child soon. You know, like me looking at that position from the perspective of like the father and the grandfather, it hit me a bit in the feels. I got to admit, that's sort of where I am on life here. But also, I quite liked Philip when he was talking in the episode where they were going through the royal household, where they're sort of saying, oh, like, what about this, this barrister's position? And then Phillips is like, well, his job is like during the parade to like walk up to the Houses of Parliament and knock 3 times to symbolize the monarch's desire to enter. And then Parliament ignores him to symbolize that the monarch is not welcome in Parliament. It is the House of the People, But this, I mean, it sounds silly, right? This is pomp and circumstance. But then he says, like, no, like there's actually a meaning behind this, that it reinforces the separation of the monarchy and the government.
Right.
And that's sort of, that's, there actually is a real meaning to this tradition. Like, to get really philosophical here, if Confucius thought. Confucius had this idea that sort of the foundations of like a functional society was 2 things he called li and ren. I don't know which one translates to rich, but basically it's like virtue and ritual.
Okay.
And it's a bit unclear if like which one goes first. Like it could be a chicken and the egg sort of thing. But the idea is like ritual sort of helps set an example. It helps sort of reinforce like what is considered good and important in society. And by ritual, he's not just referring to like your big fancy rituals, like, the pomp and the circumstance, but just, simple things like how you say hello to someone. That's a ritual. Shaking someone's hand is a ritual. How was your day? My name is, like, these are all little ritual things that we do that we don't even notice.
Right.
But in this case, sort of like, these rituals enforce things within the society, that they enforce the rules that the government and the monarchy abide by. And I sort of like him he was using a very small example, but I thought that was just a really good point into like this is present in this civilization too. Like they're like, a lot of these things might look silly in the modern era to people who don't really think about such things, but there's a genealogy to them. There's a reason why these things have evolved. And
that's what I was saying before.
Yeah.
If you don't continue to do these things, you lose them, and then you lose a part of yourself.
Yeah, but then and then there's of course the counters, like, well, you don't want to stick to too much tradition, otherwise you won't survive in the new environment.
It's funny. I've had to talk to my kids about politics, and I don't take a side when I explain it to my kids.
Yeah,
I gotta go, this is this side, this is that side. In our family, this is who believes in this is who believes in that. And I was telling them, like, what is? They were like, well, what's conservatism? And I said, conservatism is, there's a lack of enthusiasm for change, essentially. It's like, it's better if we keep things the way that they are. This is the way it's worked. It's worked well enough to this point. Let's leave it alone and keep it that way. And they're less resistant to change, they're more resistant to change. They're less likely to pass laws that are going to enact radical change, that sort of thing. And like, okay, we get that. And there's value in that. There's value in maintaining things as they are. However, if the way things are is, slavery, there's going to be some pushback to want to, change things. And that's where you have progressive ideas of not slavery. And so it's all, case by case scenario. Anyway, keep going.
No, I think that's kind of most of it. I think we were just getting into the last episode.
Yes.
There where, and I think it just kind of symbolizes, like Elizabeth's changing of attitudes. Like, it's her sort of understanding that, I'm getting older.
Yeah.
At some point I'm going to die, and it's sooner rather than later now in the span of my life.
I think like her sister dying made it very clear to her that she was probably not going to be long for this world, and that she better start making some changes. And then, and then it's kind of like, well, not right now. I don't fucking 20 years, wasn't it, before she finally passed away?
Pretty much.
About that.
Yeah.
Actually, almost exactly 20 years. And the one thing I think they kind of missed out on was actually, like, Princess Margaret and her mother died within 6 months of each other.
Mm-hmm.
So it was they both died in 2002. So it was really close to each other. And then they jump ahead a little bit, and I can kind of see that again as a major inflection point for her. Again, her getting older as well. To kind of go to your question on how long has it been that there's been kind of these rumors flying of Elizabeth handing over to Charles. It really has been about 15 years.
Yeah, I've heard rumors. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know if during this time period she was seriously about to hand over the crown, but I think she's the longest reigning monarch in history. Like, she had to have thought about it at least once. Like, yeah, maybe I should retire. Or
around the time William got married, there were rumors flying around that maybe at that point she just abdicates and hands the crown directly to William.
Yeah. There were rumors that Charles was going to get skipped over.
So it's been kind of all over the place in terms of when she was going to, if she would ever abdicate, how that would go, or anything along that line. I will say that I actually thought that whole internal debate, going back to the criticism of Force Ghost Diana, having her two younger selves come and talk to her with different perspectives on her duty and her role and things like that, were executed absolutely perfectly.
Yeah, those were good. Those were well done.
Yeah, like those were.
I
nailed
especially
it.
like the conversation in the horse stable with Olivia Colman.
Yes. It was interesting also it's also the interesting way where they kind of position those two characters, where you positioned Olivia Colman as kind of the take some time for yourself one, and they positioned Claire Foy as being the adhere to duty first, even though I think on some level that version had more adjustment issues to becoming queen.
Yeah, they could have flipped them
kind
around.
Of an interesting juxtaposition, but I enjoyed that. And maybe if we're talking last episode, I got to say the whole scene with just because I very vividly remember this moment from her funeral of the Piper walking through, I can't remember if it was either St. George's or Westminster, but going through and playing that lament, and then them putting in a scene of her selecting it and the Piper playing it and one of the servants singing it. And I don't care if it didn't happen. That's fantastic filmmaking, and I love it.
Oh no, that was very cinematic. That was great. That whole conversation, the art of the art of a scene. That's not the phrase I'm looking for, but it doesn't matter. That conversation between the bagpiper and the queen, where she's like, "What do you think? What would you play?" And it's like that look on his face of no one ever asks me anything. Hot dog, I have opinions.
Let alone the queen.
Yeah, like holy shit,
no pressure.
What I have to say. But it was nice because it was very much in character with who she was. She was like, I don't know the answer to this. It's like
you're the piper. This is your area of expertise. What's the best thing on the pipes?
Right. It was another character.
I'm a sucker for bagpipes, so there you go.
Where someone in a position of leadership goes to somebody, on the crew, and it's just like, what do you think? Because I don't know. Like it's not what I do. You're the expert, and that person going, yes, I have all these ideas. It's nice. It was a nice little human moment there, and then just like play it for me. And he's like, wait, now?
There's not a pride like that character's that actor's reaction and everything was fantastic.
Yeah. I'm sure like the real person, they would have been like, wow, I the queen asked me to pick the song for her funeral, and I assume he got to play it too, which would have been quite the experience.
It was the anatomy of a scene. That's what the word the phrase I was looking for. When you think about the anatomy of a scene, the way that's acted, the way the dialogue in it was one of the more perfect scenes of the whole show. Andrew, anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here tonight?
I think I'm probably going to call it here. I mean, I think this series started off really strong. I think it had some really good seasons. I think the structure, and we've kind of beat it to death, of this last season took away from a lot of it. I think it still went out well. I liked the last moments of the last episode. I think it was satisfying in a lot of ways. They could have gone further, but I think just the circumstances didn't allow for that to happen. It's a little bit disappointing, but I mean, am I happy that I watched it? Absolutely. I'd probably go back and rewatch some of the earlier seasons again pretty happily.
as a whole, I'm glad we did this. I'm glad we talked about it. I've enjoyed our conversations. There were elements of the final season that I liked. I'm glad we're not getting a 7th.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I was a little underwhelmed by the final conclusion. That long walk that she has out of that building. Like, I know what they were going for. It didn't quite hit me. It didn't quite hit me the way that it was intended to. But when I stand back and I look at it as a whole, I was very satisfied with this series. David, I'll give you the final word and we'll get out.
Maybe I'll jump in for one more quick thing. I did think it was kind of crafty. Sorry. When they were playing that last episode, they were alluding to her funeral without actually alluding to her funeral in a lot of ways. I thought that was kind of a neat bit of craft. But yeah, I'm generally in alignment with you. Sorry, Dave, go ahead.
No worries. Yeah, that was, like I say, they kind of, mid-production all of a sudden had an ending for the show. As an experiment of sort of talking about the British Crown through the perspective of the longest serving monarch and the life of Queen Elizabeth II, which she had a long life and was present for many many different events throughout recent history, which it's an excellent choice I think they made. And then for me, like it was very interesting to sort of learn about some of these events that I didn't know about. Again, like there is artistic license, definitely. Like I would not treat this as a documentary. I think that would be a big mistake for any viewers. But yeah, if you're just
the present,
yeah, and then that's kind of my reason why I'm kind of glad that they stopped when they did, is because I think we're just too close to the events that they would be depicting to really have enough objectivity to portray them in some form of accuracy. And I'm not taking any sides on that statement.
I'll throw this one out really quick. I thought, and I said this to Alicia, it's like it would have been fascinating for them to do an episode during Brexit. Because to have that conversation among the family of it's like, do we say something? Do we don't? And then right afterwards, there were stories on it.
For the fact that they didn't.
Sorry?
So here's the thing. I'm countering you.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I don't think they should have done a Brexit episode. I get why you're... One of the major themes of this show is...
neutrality.
You took the words out of my mouth. Is knowing when to stick your foot in it and when not to.
Yep.
And the European Union is a very political and economic thing. It almost has nothing... Whether or not... I guess there's room for debate on this, but from my American Yankee position is whether or not England is in the European Union has nothing to do with the monarchy. England's still going to be England.
Yeah, it would be more if they were doing something about the prime minister. Then yes, that's a very prime minister thing to deal with.
Well, the one thing I'll add on to that is that one interesting thing that happened directly after Brexit was there was an uptick in royal visits actually to the continent.
Okay.
Because the other thing that they talk about a little bit, and they haven't really dealt with this since I want to say like season 3, is that the royal family is also kind of an unofficial diplomatic corps, and they're kind of heavy hitters. So when there's still elements of the government who want to say we still want to be nice to Europe, but we don't want to be part of the EU anymore, they would send the royal family to try and do some of the glad handing.
I mean, then focus on that element of it.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, now
we could have wrapped it in one episode though as well. So
yeah.
Here's the thing. I kind of already said my piece on it. Now I have to kind of open up my whole bit again and add to it.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with season 6 is kind of what I said about Game of Thrones, where it got away from the central premise of the show.
Yep.
It suddenly became, we just want to talk about Charles and Diana.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like we did all of this other stuff
just to get to Charles and Diana.
Just to get to Charles and Diana.
Yeah.
It's all we care about. And it's like, no, that for those of us that have been watching this show up to this point, you got us hooked into what is the monarchy and what does it do?
Yep.
It would be like if you were watching Downton Abbey and then by the end of it, it's like, we're only going to focus on this one like tawdry affair. It's like, well, what about the people in the Abbey? What they're doing and their whole thing? Like, nope, we don't care about them anymore. It's a whole other show now then, and you've lost me. If you one of the things that we've talked about all hour is how they would touch on stuff and then they didn't explain it. They didn't get into it. They would just like point at it from about 10 yards and go, it's there. But let's focus back on Diana again. Here's this other thing, but let's focus on William and his personal troubles. It's like, if they did the Brexit thing, my feeling is they'd have touched on it and then not get into it enough to make it worthwhile endeavor.
Yeah, but I mean that's also under a theory that we don't do 4 episodes of Diana and we have more breathing room to do stuff.
Yeah, or go 12 episodes instead of 10. Like that's the other thing about like the next, just real brief aside with the Netflix structure, is they seem to be married to the 10 episode thing. Hey, remember when television used to be 22 episodes?
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to just do 10. I'm just saying. All right, guys. I've tried now 2 and 3 times to wrap this
Shutting up. Don't worry. I'm done.
Yeah. Well, I think we're pretty much ready to go here.
Okie dokie. All right. So then that is it. That is our review of The Crown season 6. Guys, thank you for pushing me kicking and screaming into this. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I'd just like to point out that we would have been done a lot sooner if we hadn't talked about Diana so much. Good night, folks. So, Loki.
That was
Thank you. Oh, yes.
All right. Tuesday, myself and Jesse start to review the final season, of Doom Patrol, and I had a minor mental breakdown in the middle of that show. So if you'd like to see me cry on camera yet again, go watch our review of Doom Patrol. It was fun for the whole family. On Monday, we reviewed Migration. I had, I had a less of a mental breakdown on that show. But Zachary Stroll did a song and dance number.
I heard it. I didn't see it because I was listening to it, but I heard it.
Okay, I'll have to go. I think I might have that one on queue. I'll have to check it out. Is it as good as the time that Sean wrapped him onto Long Road to himself onto Long Road to Ruin?
It's better because it's shorter.
Okay, fair enough.
Next week, David is threatening to join us for Rebel Moon.
I'm more than threatening.
It'll be myself, Alexis, and Robert. That is also doubling as our year in review. So we'll look back at the movies that were. We'll look back at the money, all of that.
It's going to be the longest podcast episode ever on this network.
And then Tuesday, we've got the Metal Hammer of Doom Jukebox 2023 year in review show. I will be guessing on movies that don't suck and some that do. On Wednesday, we'll be doing their year in review show, a lot of year in reviews. And a show that isn't a year in review, myself and Pat are going to be doing a triple feature of the Punisher movies. Yes, sir. Yes, Zach had a mental breakdown on Monday. It's like his best show ever, though. That was the weird part.
Who's Dr. Hyde, by the way?
That's Robert's brother. Who couldn't watch us on Twitch tonight because the Talk to Keki guys were on Twitch, and we can't have 2 streams on Twitch at the same time. So he's watching on YouTube instead because he's a big fan, and we love Robert's brother.
Thanks.
Anyway, so Pat's going to be on. We're going to do the Dolph Lundgren Punisher, the Thomas Jane Punisher, and then the Ray Stevens Punisher War Journal movie. So that'll be fun. Pat taking a break from boxing to talk Punisher movies with me. David will be back in a few weeks to talk Lower Deck Season 3.
Yeah, Lower Deck Season 3.
Lower Decks.
And Andrew, are you going to join Alexis to talk about Echo?
I'm probably not at this point just because she sent me the date and it's like I don't have enough time to watch it. And I think that also conflicts with I think hockey on that night with the kids. So unfortunately not. I am looking forward to that show though. I think that might be like the one that Marvel didn't care about and thus the guys actually did something really interesting with. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel I've been burned one too many times by both Marvel and Star Wars television shows that I still haven't watched Loki season 2. That's how behind I am or unwilling to watch these things as I've become. But I might give Echo, if I have time, I might give Echo a chance.
I will watch it on your behalf and let you know if it's worth a watch.
Thank you for taking that bullet for me. So when are you back, Andrew?
I think, and I'll say it in the Griffonian way, Roadhouse.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, when we do the Roadhouse on trial, I think was what we were talking about.
Did I schedule that already? I have to look.
I thought you did. It was something like in March or something like that.
Maybe. Let's see.
Anyway, but yeah, I think we're going to do a on trial of the original. Was it 89?
Yes. You're coming on for you and Sean.
Yeah.
So I don't have you in there. I gotta actually put you. Okay, I put it in the. I didn't realize that you were doing that show.
I thought you sent it to me already on the chat, but anyway, sorry guys, production meeting.
Well, you're added now, bud. There you go. You and Sean.
All right.
You, me,
But yeah,
and Sean.
That's gonna be fun. I've never actually seen the original Roadhouse, so I have 0 point of reference.
Me neither. That's part of why I wanted to do this. But yeah, that's in March.
Nice.
That whole podcast should just be these aren't the Punisher Netflix shows. Thank you, Robert's brother. Anywho,
I kind of
all
agree
right,
with him,
folks.
but anyway.
That's all for me. Thanks, I'm driving. Thank you to the 2 Canadians for joining me on The Crown. Be well, be safe, and behave.